This is the news in brief from the United Nations. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres began a two-day tour of Moldova on Monday to express his solidarity and gratitude to the country's people for taking in nearly 500,000 refugees from Ukraine since the Russian invasion on the 24th of February. In addition to holding talks in the capital, Chisinau, with President Maia Sandu and other senior officials, Mr. Guterres is due to visit a refugee centre run with the support of UN agencies, offering people temporary places to stay, hot meals and the opportunity to register for cash assistance. The Secretary-General was also scheduled to meet one of the many families who have taken in the majority of refugees from Ukraine in Moldova. To date, more than 5.8 million people have fled shelling and fighting in Ukraine across its borders, according to the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR. In a related development, the UN Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE, announced that it's joined forces with star architect Norman Foster to rebuild Kharkiv in northeast Ukraine. About 25% of housing has been destroyed by bombing in Kharkiv since the Russian invasion, the city's mayor Igor Terekhov said. But administrative buildings, schools, nurseries, cultural centres, infrastructure and power stations have also been damaged, all of which will need reconstructing. Here's Norman Foster now.
This is an extraordinary opportunity to combine the best, the most loved aspects of a city with the city of the future, which has been described to me very eloquently by the mayor in terms of how he sees his city as a city of culture, a city of industry, of advanced technology, and how one builds on that for the future.
The UN for Kharkiv task force comprises more than 10 UN agencies which are working together to support the efforts of the government in developing innovative approaches to rebuilding cities in Ukraine. Drought in Ethiopia, the country's worst in 40 years, is believed to be behind an increase in maternal and newborn deaths in recent months, UN humanitarians warned on Monday. In an alert from the UN Population Fund, UNFPA, it reported that pregnant women with labour complications and no transport had travelled up to 200 kilometres to get medical help in Ethiopia's Somali region. Women and girls are the hardest hit by the climate crisis, the UN agency said, noting that in eastern and southern Ethiopia, seasonal rains have failed for the third time since late 2020. This has fueled mass displacement and deepened an already dire humanitarian situation. Nearly 8 million people have been affected, UNFPA said, and more than 286,000 Ethiopian Somalis have been displaced, fleeing their homes to survive as crops, livestock and livelihoods are wiped out. In the Somali region, some 930,000 people need emergency and reproductive health support, and more than 565,000 people have reduced access to protection services. This includes women, children and survivors of gender-based violence. UNFPA cited data from the Ethiopian Public Health Institute showing that more than 60% of those living in the Somali region are over an hour's walk away from the nearest health facility, which may or may not be functioning, even if they do manage to reach it. UN-led talks on space security began on Monday in a bid to find common ground among member states and manage the growing number of risks to global peace. The first open-ended working group on reducing space threats, taking place all this week in Geneva, follows a UN General Assembly resolution last December, seeking to promote norms, rules and principles of responsible behaviours on space-based threats. Progress on disarmament is also a key priority of UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who recently reported on ways to reduce the risks of misunderstanding and miscalculations on outer space issues. An international treaty for outer space already exists that forms the basis of international space law, but it is 55 years old and needs updating urgently, said Helmut Legos, who's chairing the talks in Geneva on reducing space threats. Daniel Johnson, UN News. This is the news in brief from the United Nations. Almost 76 days have elapsed since Russia invaded Ukraine, leaving countless civilians caught up in the horror of war, UN rights investigators said on Tuesday. In its latest update, the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine confirmed that more than 3,380 civilians have been killed since the 24th of February. The true number of victims will likely be many thousands more once it is safe enough for the rights monitors to access places like the devastated southern port city of Mariupol, said Head of Mission Matilda Bogner.
During my recent visit to towns north of Kiev, we documented a number of cases of sexual violence. In one town that we visited, a woman was raped and killed allegedly by a Russian soldier. The same soldier then attempted to rape her neighbour. This woman's husband intervened, but was then shot by the soldier, and he later died.
Many Ukrainians continue to search for missing relatives and friends, mainly younger men, some of whom have been taken to Belarus and then Russia, Ms. Bogner said. In Afghanistan, more than 19 million people face acute hunger. That's 1 in 2 people in the country, UN humanitarians warned. Amid continuing restrictions against women and girls, many Afghan families are even less able to help themselves. Here's Anthea Webb, the World Food Programme's Deputy Regional Director for Asia.
In any situation where such an important portion of the population that women represent are unable to go to work, both because they've lost their jobs or because they are afraid to leave their houses or because of newly imposed restrictions, that is bound to have a disproportionate effect on a family's ability to feed themselves.
Even before the Taliban takeover last August, drought triggered dire food insecurity across the country. And although a food emergency has been averted, more than 20,000 people in northeastern Ghor province are facing catastrophic levels of hunger. So far this year, the World Food Programme has reached more than 16 million of the most needy people in Afghanistan, making it the world's largest humanitarian food operation. To Sri Lanka now, and a call from UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet to the authorities to prevent further violence after supporters of the Prime Minister attacked and reportedly killed peaceful protesters in Colombo. The development followed months of turbulence linked to the economic crisis, which has left most people struggling to survive, according to the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Ms. Bachelet said that she'd been deeply troubled by the escalation of violence. During the flare-up, 7 people died, including a member of parliament, and over 250 were injured. Daniel Johnson, UN News.